In our last video, we showed you what Ukraine did to Rubicon in 72 hours, how Ukraine's Special Operations Forces erased Russia's most elite drone unit from the inside of occupied Donetsk using a weapon Russia never saw coming. But that 72-hour window didn't just change the battlefield in Ukraine, it revealed something that is now reshaping a conflict thousands of miles away. Because while Rubicon was burning, Iran thought it had found the perfect weapon. Not a missile, not a nuclear program, not a navy, a drone. A cheap, mass-produced, expendable drone that costs almost nothing to build and costs the United States millions of dollars to destroy. And the country that just figured out how to stop it is the same country that just erased Rubicon. Ukraine is now in the Middle East, and what happens next changes everything. And at $4 million per missile, you don't need to be an economist to understand why this strategy was working brilliantly for Iran and catastrophically for the United States. But here's what Iran did not see coming: Ukraine. Of all the countries on Earth, Ukraine. The nation that has been fighting for its survival against Russia for 4 years. The nation that has been on the receiving end of these exact same Iranian drones since the very beginning of the war. Ukraine has just entered this conflict in the most unexpected way possible, and it may have just ended Iran's entire drone strategy in a single move. Ukraine is sending its interceptor drones to the Middle East. Right now, as you listen to this, Ukrainian weapons are heading to American bases in Jordan, to Saudi Arabia, to Qatar, to the United Arab Emirates, and alongside those weapons, more than 200 Ukrainian drone experts have already deployed to the Gulf region, with dozens more ready to follow. This is a story about a $1,000 drone defeating a multi-billion-dollar problem. It's a story about how 4 years of brutal warfare turned Ukraine into the world's most advanced drone-fighting nation, and how that expertise is now being sold, traded, and leveraged to reshape the entire Middle East conflict. But it's also a story about something bigger, about how Ukraine, still fighting for its own survival, is simultaneously turning its battlefield knowledge into geopolitical leverage that could change the terms of its own war with Russia. Stay with us, because the numbers here will shock you. This is Signal Drop, and we're breaking it all down. Let's start with the problem, because to understand why Ukraine's solution is so extraordinary, you have to first understand exactly how badly Iran's drone strategy was working against the United States. Operation Epic Fury opened with a nightmare for U.S. command. In the very first hours of the operation, 6 American military personnel were killed. The weapon that killed them, according to Euronews, was almost certainly a Shahed-type drone. The same category of cheap Iranian-manufactured unmanned aircraft that has become the signature weapon of proxy warfare across the Middle East. Now, on paper, this should not be a problem for the United States military. The U.S. has the most advanced air defense systems ever built. It has Patriot batteries, it has radar networks, it has interceptor missiles that can hit a target the size of a car traveling at hundreds of miles per hour from dozens of miles away. The United States military is not supposed to struggle with drones that cost $20,000 to $50,000 each. But here's the trap Iran set. And it was working perfectly. Iran wasn't trying to win a direct military confrontation with the United States. It knew it couldn't. What Iran was doing was bleeding the U.S. financially and logistically, one drone swarm at a time. Here's the math, and it's the kind of math that makes Pentagon officials lose sleep. Iran builds a Shahed drone for somewhere between $20,000 and $50,000. The U.S. fires a Patriot missile to intercept it. That Patriot missile costs $4 million. Let's walk through a real scenario. Iran launches a swarm of just 5 drones at an American base. 5 drones. The cost to Iran, $250,000 at most. The cost to the United States, $20 million in Patriot missiles, and that assumes every single missile hits its target. If even one Patriot misses, you're firing another $4 million missile. For every dollar Iran spends on its drone campaign, the United States is spending $80 to stop it. 80 to 1. That is not a military equation. That is a financial stranglehold. And Zelensky confirmed exactly how unsustainable this had already become. In the first 3 days of Operation Epic Fury alone, the United States burned through 800 Patriot missiles. 800. At $4 million each, that is $3.2 billion spent in 72 hours. Not on offensive operations, not on winning the war, on swatting drones out of the sky. There are only so many Patriot missiles in any stockpile. And there are only so many billions of dollars that even the richest military on the planet can burn through before someone in Washington starts asking very uncomfortable questions about how long this is sustainable. Iran understood all of this perfectly, and it was counting on the United States having no good answer. It was wrong. The answer came from the one country that had been living with this exact problem for 4 years: Ukraine. This is the part of the story that requires some context because it explains why Ukraine, a nation currently fighting for its own survival, is uniquely positioned to solve a problem that has stumped the most powerful military in the world. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Iran made a decision that would have consequences far beyond the battlefield it was intended to support. Iran began supplying Russia with Shahed drones, the same Shaheds now being launched at U.S. bases across the Middle East. And it wasn't long before Iran went further, signing a licensing deal with Putin that allowed Russia to manufacture Shahed-type drones on Russian soil with Iranian technical support. What this means is that Ukraine has been fighting Iranian drones, the exact same design, the exact same capabilities, the exact same swarm tactics, for 4 straight years. 4 years of being hit by Shaheds, 4 years of watching them take out power plants, apartment buildings, military positions, 4 years of figuring out through trial and error and loss and innovation how to stop them. Ukraine didn't study this problem in a research lab. Ukraine solved this problem while people were dying, and the solution Ukraine developed is called Sting. Before we get into exactly what Sting is and what it does to Iran's entire strategy, this is the moment to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Signal Drop covers stories exactly like this one, the full picture behind the headlines, every week. Don't miss what's coming next. Now let's talk about Sting. Sting is not the kind of weapon that sounds impressive when you describe it on paper. It is a small drone. It carries a payload that weighs 500 grams, just over 1 pound. Its range is 37 kilometers. Its maximum altitude is 7 kilometers. By the standards of military hardware, these are modest specifications. But what Sting does with those modest specifications is nothing short of revolutionary. The new voice of Ukraine describes Sting as an FPV interceptor, a first-person view drone designed specifically to hunt and destroy incoming Shaheds. Its top speed is 315 kilometers per hour, fast enough to intercept a Shahed flying its final approach. An operator using VR goggles can see exactly what Sting sees in real time, track the target, and guide the interceptor to impact. But Sting doesn't rely solely on its human operator. It is also equipped with an AI-based guidance system that allows it to track and follow an incoming Shahed independently, compensating for evasive flight paths, adjusting in real time, staying locked onto its target even if the drone tries to maneuver. And if the impact itself isn't sufficient, Sting carries a remote detonation mechanism that allows the operator to trigger its warhead at the optimal moment. The result is a hit rate of between 80 and 90% against Shahed-type drones. Let that number sit for a second. In combat conditions, against real incoming drones, under real battlefield stress, using real operators, Sting is successful 8 or 9 times out of 10. As of February 24th, according to United 24 Media, Ukraine's interceptor drones now account for 30% of all of Ukraine's air defense kills. 30% of everything Ukraine shoots down is being taken out not by expensive missile systems, but by these small, fast, cheap interceptors. And here is the number that changes everything. Sting costs $1,000 to build. Reuters puts the export price at around $2,000. Either way, you are looking at a weapon that costs roughly 1/1500th of the Patriot missile it replaces. Go back to that scenario we walked through earlier. Iran launches 5 Shaheds. The US responds with Patriots. Cost $20 million. Now Iran launches 5 Shaheds. The US responds with Sting interceptors. Cost $5,000 to $10,000. $5,000 versus $20 million. The United States goes from spending 80 times what Iran spends to spending a fraction of what Iran spends. The entire financial logic of Iran's drone strategy doesn't just weaken, it collapses. What was Iran's greatest strategic advantage becomes, in an instant, Iran's greatest liability, because now every Shahed Iran launches costs Iran more than it costs the United States to destroy it. Iran designed its entire drone campaign around a financial trap. Ukraine just sprung the trap in the other direction. Now, some of you may be thinking, if the solution is this obvious, why didn't the United States develop something like this on its own? Why does a country that spends more on its military than the next 10 nations combined need to come to Ukraine for a $1,000 drone? It's a fair question, and the answer is not flattering for the traditional defense industry. The United States military procurement system is built around complexity, cost, and long development cycles. Patriot missiles are extraordinary pieces of technology, but they were designed to intercept ballistic missiles and advanced aircraft, not mass-produced Iranian drones that cost the same as a used car. Ukraine, by contrast, had no choice but to be creative. When you are being attacked every single night, when you cannot afford to fire a $100,000 missile at every $20,000 drone, you innovate out of necessity. Ukraine built Sting because Ukraine needed Sting to survive. That urgency produced a weapon that no defense contractor with a $100 million development budget had built, because no defense contractor had faced the problem Ukraine faced. And now, the US wants what Ukraine built. The request came directly from Washington to Kiev, and Zelensky confirmed it publicly on March 5, writing, "We received a request from the United States for specific support in protection against Shaheds in the Middle East region." He added that he had immediately given instructions to provide the necessary means and to ensure the presence of Ukrainian specialists capable of guaranteeing the required security. Note what he said, not just the weapons, the specialists. Because Ukraine understands something the defense industry has always underestimated. Hardware is only as effective as the people operating it. By March 17th, Zelensky confirmed that 201 Ukrainian specialists were already in the Middle East and Gulf region. Another 34 were ready to deploy. These experts are present in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, with deals being formulated with additional countries. Ukraine is not just selling a product. Ukraine is providing a complete capability. We are at the halfway point, and the next section is where this story stops being about drones and starts being about geopolitics, about leverage, about what Ukraine is building for itself in the middle of fighting for its own survival. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe right now. This is exactly the kind of analysis Signal Drop delivers every week. Back to the story. Let's talk about the scale of what Ukraine can actually deliver. Because one of the objections you might expect is that Ukraine can't possibly produce enough interceptors to make a real difference while simultaneously fighting Russia. That objection is destroyed by a single statistic. In 2025 alone, Ukraine produced 100,000 interceptor drones, and Ukraine didn't even begin deploying them in high volume until the end of that year. Now, according to Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council, production capacity has grown eightfold. Ukraine currently claims it can produce 800,000 interceptor drones annually, provided it has the funding. Read that number again, 800,000 per year. That is roughly 2,200 interceptors per day, every day of the year. And in a March 18th report, Business Insider confirmed that Ukraine has already told its U.S. and Middle Eastern partners that it can supply up to 1,000 interceptor drones per day to support the defense against Iran's Shaheds, with capacity to scale even higher if additional investment is provided. Iran's entire drone strategy depends on the assumption that it can overwhelm air defenses through sheer volume. That assumption was valid when every interception required a $4 million Patriot missile. It is no longer valid when every interception costs $1,000, and Ukraine can produce more than 2,000 of those interceptors every single day. Iran cannot outproduce Ukraine. Iran cannot outswarm a country that can manufacture its counterweapon faster than Iran can manufacture the original threat. The math of this war just changed completely. Now, there is something else happening here that goes beyond the immediate tactical reality, something that Zelensky has been very deliberate about signaling publicly, and it's the piece of this story that most coverage is missing entirely. Ukraine is not just giving these drones away, Ukraine is using them as leverage. If we take Reuters' export price of $2,000 per drone as the baseline, and Ukraine is supplying 1,000 drones per day, that is $2 million per day. Sustained over a year, that is $730 million in annual revenue flowing directly back into Ukraine's war effort. But Zelensky has also made clear that money is not the only currency he is trading in. On March 15th, Reuters reported him saying, "For us today, both the technology and the funding are important." What he meant by technology is exactly what you think he meant. Ukraine is willing to trade interceptor drones and battlefield expertise for Western weapon systems it cannot produce itself. Advanced air defense missiles, electronic warfare equipment, the kinds of high-technology military hardware that have been hardest to obtain from Western partners. Ukraine is building a new kind of defense diplomacy. You need our drones to fight Iran. We need your missiles to fight Russia. Let's make a deal. And then there is the political dimension. The New York Times captured this in a March 9th piece, noting that Ukraine's decision to provide interceptors to the U.S. signals to the Trump administration, which has been pushing hard on peace negotiations between Ukraine and Russia, that Ukraine is a reliable, capable, and valuable partner. That Ukraine shows up when its allies need it, even while fighting for its own survival. This is Ukraine saying to Washington, "Look at what we just did for you. We sent you our best weapon and our best people. We didn't wait to be asked twice. We delivered." Now think about whether that kind of partner is someone you want to pressure into unfavorable peace terms, or whether that is someone you want to keep close. And there's a darker mirror to hold up alongside that image, because according to multiple reports, Russia has been providing intelligence and drone technology to Iran during Operation Epic Fury. The country that the Trump administration has been trying to accommodate in peace negotiations is actively helping Iran attack U.S. bases. Ukraine is helping the U.S. defend against those attacks. Russia is helping Iran launch them. Ukraine does not have to say this out loud. The contrast says it for them. There is one more angle to this story that deserves its own examination, because Ukraine isn't just building a relationship with the United States through this operation, it is simultaneously building relationships with Gulf nations that have historically had almost no direct engagement with Kyiv. Before Operation Epic Fury, Ukraine and the Gulf states existed in largely separate strategic universes. Saudi Arabia had provided $400 million in humanitarian aid to Ukraine back in 2023. Qatar had served as a quiet behind-the-scenes mediator, helping reunite over 100 Ukrainian and Russian children with their families. Neither was a military partnership. Now, Ukraine has more than 200 drone experts on the ground in these countries. It has active deals with Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE. It is in negotiations with additional Gulf nations. It has demonstrated in real time that its weapons work and that its people know how to use them. The Arab Weekly noted that Ukraine is not simply positioning itself to sell weapons to Gulf nations, it is positioning itself to create dependencies. Ongoing relationships that can be leveraged into long-term strategic partnerships with countries that Putin never imagined would be aligned against Russia's interests. Think about what that means from Kyiv's perspective. Saudi Arabia has enormous financial resources. The UAE has influence across the broader Middle East and beyond. Qatar has relationships with actors on multiple sides of multiple conflicts. These are not small players. And Ukraine, through the simple act of showing up with a $1,000 drone and 200 experts, is writing itself into their strategic calculations in a way that will outlast Operation Epic Fury. Zelensky put it directly on March 17th. We are ready to offer similar deals to all our reliable partners, from practical cooperation on drones to future defense alliances. Let's address the counter-argument because it exists and it's worth confronting directly. U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has claimed that Iran's drone activity has fallen by 95% compared to the initial salvos. The combined U.S. and Israeli military campaign against Iran's drone infrastructure has clearly had an effect. So if Iran's drone threat is already diminished by 95%, does Ukraine's interceptor contribution really matter? Yes, for two reasons. The first is mathematical. 95% reduction does not mean zero. On March 19th, Saudi Arabia's air defense systems intercepted and destroyed 5 Iranian drones heading toward the country's eastern region and toward Riyadh. 5 Shaheds intercepted by Patriot still cost $20 million. 5 Shaheds intercepted by Sting interceptors costs $5,000 to $10,000. The savings are real regardless of volume. The second reason is strategic. The situation with Iran has not resolved itself. The underlying conflict has not ended. Iran's production capability for Shaheds has not been eliminated. And the infrastructure Ukraine is building right now, the relationships, the training, the supply chains, the technical partnerships, is designed for a longer timeline than the current operation. Ukraine is not setting up a temporary fix. It is establishing itself as a permanent component of Middle Eastern air defense architecture. When the next crisis comes, and in that region there is always a next crisis, Ukraine will already be there, already integrated, already trusted, already indispensable. So let's bring this all the way back to where we started. Iran believed it had created the perfect asymmetric weapon, a drone so cheap that it didn't matter if most of them were shot down. The real victory was forcing the United States to spend $80 for every dollar Iran spent, bleeding America dry one Patriot missile at a time. In the first 3 days of Operation Epic Fury, that strategy cost the United States $3.2 billion, and Iran was just getting started. Then Ukraine arrived. Ukraine, the country that Iran helped arm Russia against. Ukraine, the country that has been absorbing Shahed strikes on apartment buildings, hospitals, and power plants for 4 straight years. Ukraine showed up with a drone that costs $1,000, hits its target 80 to 90% of the time, can be produced at 800,000 units per year, and transforms the entire financial logic of Iran's strategy from Iran's greatest weapon into Iran's greatest liability. The same drone Iran used to help Russia bleed Ukraine is now being turned against Iran itself. The knowledge Iran's weapons created through 4 years of forcing Ukraine to innovate under fire is now being deployed to neutralize the very threat Iran is trying to project. There is a certain justice to that arc, and there is a certain warning in it too. For Iran, for Russia, for anyone who thought that 4 years of attacking Ukraine had weakened it. Those 4 years didn't weaken Ukraine. They made it into the most combat-tested drone warfare nation on Earth. They produced weapons and expertise that the most powerful military in the world is now paying for, trading for, and deploying in its own conflicts. They turned a country that was supposed to be overwhelmed in 72 hours into a global defense partner with leverage over geopolitical outcomes thousands of miles from its own borders. 201 Ukrainian specialists are in the Middle East right now. 34 more are ready to go. Ukraine can put 1,000 interceptor drones per day into the hands of its partners. Iran's trump card is being systematically dismantled, not by the United States, not by Israel, by Ukraine. And Ukraine is doing all of this while simultaneously fighting Russia. If that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about what 4 years of war has produced, nothing will. This is Signal Drop. Subscribe now and turn on notifications because the next story we're covering is the one the defense industry does not want you to understand. The U.S. laser systems being deployed alongside Ukraine's interceptors is the development that could make Patriot missiles obsolete entirely. That story drops next. Don't miss it.